Hello, dear one. I'm so glad you're here. Before we begin our story together, I want you to know something. It's okay that your heart feels tired. It's okay that you've been carrying so much. The weight you feel, the exhaustion that settles into your bones, the heaviness that sits behind your eyes, that's real, and it's understood. You don't have to explain it or justify it or feel ashamed of it. You've done so much. You've tried so hard. And right now, in this quiet moment, you deserve to rest. This story isn't meant to fix anything or solve anything. It's simply here to hold you gently while you let yourself be still. There's nowhere you need to be. No one is waiting for anything from you. For these next moments, your only job is to breathe, to listen, and to allow yourself to feel safe. As you settle in, perhaps you can find the most comfortable position, a soft pillow that supports your head just right, a blanket that feels like a gentle embrace. If you'd like, you can close your eyes now, or keep them softly open. There's no right way to do this. Just be here, exactly as you are. Now, let me tell you a story about someone very much like you. Someone whose heart learned that it was finally okay to rest. Once upon a time, in a landscape that existed somewhere between the real world and dreams, there lived a young woman named Iris. Her name meant rainbow. Though she had almost forgotten this when our story begins. She had been so focused on moving forward, on handling each task, each worry, each responsibility that landed on her shoulders, that she had forgotten the meaning of her own name. Iris lived in a tall, narrow house at the edge of a small town. It was a respectable house, the kind of house that looked fine from the outside. The windows were clean. The door was painted a cheerful blue. But inside, Iris carried something that no one could quite see. It was a weight. Not the kind you could measure on a scale, but the kind that made breathing feel slightly more difficult than it should. The kind that made mornings feel gray even when the sun was shining. The kind that made her shoulders ache by noon, even though she hadn't done anything physical. She had been carrying this weight for so long that she had almost stopped noticing it. Almost, but not quite. Iris worked in a job that required her to be present, to be capable, to hold everything together. She worked with people, many people, and each one needed something from her. Guidance, solutions, answers, a calm presence, a reassuring smile. And Iris gave these things. She always did. She was the kind of person who said yes when asked, the kind of person who stayed late, the kind of person who thought of one more thing that needed doing right before bed, the kind of person who woke up at 3 in the morning thinking about something she'd forgotten. On top of this, there were the things that lived in her personal life. There was the complicated relationship with someone she loved. There were the small disappointments that accumulated like dust, things she'd hoped for that hadn't come to pass. There was the awareness that she was not where she thought she would be by now. There was the gentle, persistent ache of time passing, of years moving forward, of chapters closing before she was quite ready. All of these things, taken separately, might have been manageable. But together, layered one on top of another, they created the weight that Iris carried. Take a slow, easy breath with me now. You're safe here. For years, Iris had lived in a kind of forward motion. She believed that if she just kept moving, if she kept doing, if she kept being strong enough and capable enough and available enough, then eventually things would sort themselves out. Eventually she would feel better. Eventually the weight would lift. So she moved. She did. She was. But the weight didn't lift. Instead, one autumn morning, Iris woke up and realized she couldn't quite remember what it felt like not to be tired. Not the kind of tired that comes from a single sleepless night, but the kind of tired that lives in your very bones. The kind that comes from carrying something heavy for so long that you've started to believe it's simply part of your body. That morning, she called in sick to work. She had never done this before. She always went to work. But that morning, something inside her whispered, "You can't today. You just can't." And for the first time in longer than she could remember, Iris listened to that whisper. She spent the first day under her blankets. She didn't do much of anything. She didn't meditate or journal or try to work through anything. She simply lay there, and slowly, for the first time, she allowed herself to stop pretending she was fine. That afternoon, as the gray autumn light filtered through her bedroom window, Iris remembered something she hadn't thought of in years. She remembered that her grandmother had left her a cottage. Not the tall, narrow house where she lived now. A different place entirely. A cottage that Iris had inherited but had never actually visited. It was somewhere far away, in a place she'd never been, and she'd been meaning to sort out what to do with it. But like so many things in her life, she had simply set it aside, tucked it away, because she didn't have time to handle it. That night, from her bed, Iris made a phone call to the caretaker who looked after the property. She found that his name was Thomas, and he spoke in a kind, patient voice that somehow made her feel less alone. She explained, in a voice that trembled slightly, that she needed a break, that she needed to see the cottage, that she would be arriving in a week. Thomas didn't ask many questions. He simply said, "It will be ready for you. It's been waiting." That phrase stuck with Iris. It's been waiting. Somehow, knowing that she was going to go somewhere, that she was going to step away from her usual life, made something inside her shift slightly. It wasn't hope exactly. Hope seemed too big, too demanding. It was something smaller and quieter. Permission. Permission to stop. Permission to pause. Permission to rest. The following week, Iris packed a bag. She didn't pack for adventure. She packed soft clothes, sweaters and comfortable trousers and thick socks. She packed a few books she'd been meaning to read but never had time for. She packed tea. She packed a journal, though she wasn't sure she'd use it. Most importantly, she packed the heaviest, warmest blanket she owned. A blanket that had been made by her grandmother's hands decades ago, and which Iris had treasured since childhood. The drive to the cottage took many hours, and Iris drove slowly. She didn't rush. She stopped when she felt tired. She didn't listen to urgent news on the radio. Instead, she listened to soft music, the kind with no lyrics, the kind that seemed to exist only to be gentle. As she drove, she watched the landscape change. The familiar streets of her town gave way to suburban neighborhoods, which gave way to rolling hills, which eventually gave way to something more wild and quiet. Mountains rose in the distance, purple and soft in the late afternoon light. The roads became narrower and more winding, and with each mile, Iris felt something inside her beginning to relax. Just slightly, just a tiny bit, like a fist that had been clenched for years, slowly opening its fingers just enough to breathe. It was early evening when Iris finally arrived at the cottage. Thomas was waiting for her outside, and he was exactly the kind of person his voice had suggested, an older man with kind eyes and weathered hands. He smiled when he saw her, as though she were someone he'd been expecting all along. "Welcome," he said simply. "Your grandmother would be happy you're here." The cottage itself was small and made of stone and timber. It had a peaked roof where snow would rest in winter. There was a wooden porch that wrapped around the front, and hanging from the porch beam was a small lantern made of wrought iron, the kind that would hold a candle and cast dancing shadows in the darkness. The garden around the cottage was overgrown with autumn flowers that had gone to seed, their heads tilted down, their petals falling softly. There were wild roses and lavender, though their fragrance had mostly faded for the season. Everything about it felt untended but not abandoned. Everything about it felt like it was waiting. Thomas had prepared the cottage for her arrival. There was firewood stacked beside the hearth. There were candles on every surface, small candles, tall candles, candles in colored glass holders. In the kitchen, he had left fresh bread, butter, honey, and tea. On the table, there was a note in his handwriting, "Rest well." After Thomas left, Iris stood alone in the cottage and took her first truly deep breath in longer than she could remember. The main room of the cottage was small and cozy. There was a stone fireplace that took up most of one wall. In front of it sat a wooden rocking chair with a cushion, and beside it, a small table where a person could rest a cup of tea or lay down an open book. On the mantel, there were family photographs, many of them showing a young woman Iris recognized as her grandmother, and a few showing Iris herself as a child, in this very cottage, though she could barely remember these visits. There was also a simple bedroom with a bed that had a quilted coverlet, and a small kitchen, and a bathroom with an old-fashioned tub. But what Iris found most comforting was what the cottage did not contain. There was no television. There was no Wi-Fi, or at least none that she could find. There was no sound except for the wind moving through the trees outside, and the distant call of birds settling in for the evening. Iris made herself tea and sat down in the rocking chair. The fire was already lit in the fireplace. Thomas must have done this, and the flames moved and danced in that hypnotic way that flames do. She held her tea with both hands, feeling its warmth, and she allowed herself to simply sit. And as she sat, something extraordinary happened. For the first time in years, she ran out of things to do. There was no list waiting for her, no emails to check, no problems to solve, no one who needed anything from her. There was simply Iris, and her tea, and the fire, and the slowly darkening sky outside. She sat in that chair as the evening deepened into night. The fire crackled softly. The candles on the mantel flickered gently. And slowly, very slowly, Iris felt the smallest tension in her shoulders begin to ease. That first night, Iris slept 14 hours. She fell asleep around 8 o'clock, still in her rocking chair, with the fire casting a warm glow across her face. At some point in the night, she stirred just enough to make her way to the bedroom. She pulled on her grandmother's blanket like a cocoon and lay in the darkness, and she slept the kind of sleep that comes when your body finally understands it's safe to stop fighting. When she woke, it was mid-morning, and pale sunlight was streaming through the window. For a moment, Iris felt the old familiar guilt rise up in her chest. She should be awake earlier. She should be doing something. She should be productive. But then she remembered there was nothing she needed to do. No one was waiting for her. She was simply a woman in a cottage, and she could wake whenever she woke. This thought was so novel, so strange, that she lay in bed for another hour, just experiencing it. Eventually, she rose and made herself breakfast. She found eggs and toast, and made a simple meal. She ate sitting on the porch, wrapped in a blanket, watching the wind move through the trees. The trees were turning. It was late autumn, and the leaves were moving from green to gold to red to brown. They moved in the wind like they were dancing. Iris had a sudden thought. I am allowed to watch this. I'm allowed to spend time just watching leaves move in the wind. This, too, felt like permission. Over the next several days, a rhythm began to establish itself. Iris would wake without an alarm. She would make coffee or tea. She would sit on the porch or in front of the fire, depending on the weather. She would read. She would nap. She would go for very slow walks around the property, noticing things. The way the moss grew on the north side of the stone cottage, the pattern of bird tracks in the wet earth, the particular shade of blue that the sky held just before sunset. She didn't push herself to do anything. She didn't wake up with plans or goals. She simply let each day unfold as it would. On the fourth day, it rained. Iris woke to the sound of rain on the roof of the cottage. And rather than feeling disappointed, as she might have before, she felt something close to joy. The rain gave her permission to stay inside all day. It gave her permission to not even consider going out. She built the fire up large and bright, and she settled into the rocking chair with her grandmother's blanket and a book, and she let the sound of rain fill all the quiet spaces in the cottage. The rain fell steadily all day and into the evening. It pattered on the windows. It dripped from the gutters in a rhythmic, soothing pattern. And Iris sat with her tea and her book, and she listened. As she sat, something began to happen inside her. The tight knot of worry that had lived in her chest for so long began, very gradually, very slowly, to loosen. Not all at once, not completely, but it began. She realized that she had been afraid. Beneath all the doing, beneath all the productivity, beneath all the effort to hold everything together, there had been a deep, underlying fear. Fear that if she stopped, everything would fall apart. Fear that she wasn't enough. Fear that if she rested, she would be selfish or lazy or would disappoint someone. Fear that if she stopped moving, she would have to feel all the sadness and disappointment and grief that she'd been outrunning. And now, sitting in the cottage with the rain, Iris began to understand something. The things she had been afraid would happen if she stopped had already, in some ways, happened. Life had already disappointed her. Things had already fallen apart. And she was still here. She was still okay. The rain fell, and Iris cried, but not in a frightened or desperate way. She cried in the way that rain falls. Naturally, gently, the way tears were meant to fall sometimes. And when she was finished crying, she wiped her eyes and made herself a fresh cup of tea, and she kept sitting by the fire. This, she realized, was what healing looked like. Not fixing, not solving, not getting over it, just sitting with it, just allowing it, just being gentle with yourself while you felt what needed to be felt. Over the following days, Iris began to venture out more. The rain stopped, and the weather became clear and cold, the kind of crisp autumn cold that makes you feel alive. She took longer walks. She walked all the way around the cottage, exploring the full scope of the garden. At the very back of the property, she discovered a small stone bench, positioned to look out over a valley that stretched to distant mountains. She sat there for hours, not thinking about anything in particular, just existing in the quiet. She also began to write in her journal, not because she felt she should, but because she wanted to. She wrote about how she felt. She wrote about the things she had been carrying. She wrote about her grandmother, trying to remember what this woman had taught her, what wisdom might be living in these walls that her grandmother had built. One afternoon, while looking through some of the old furniture in the cottage, Iris found a box of her grandmother's letters. They were old, The paper yellowed with age, and they were written in a careful, elegant script. Iris read them slowly, and discovered that her grandmother, too, had known weariness. Her grandmother had also struggled. Her grandmother had also, at times, felt the weight of being the one who held things together. But there was something else in the letters, too. There was wisdom. There was gentleness. And underneath it all, there was this repeated phrase that her grandmother had written again and again. Rest is not laziness. Rest is healing. Iris read this phrase many times. She let it settle into her bones. By the second week, something had shifted in Iris. It wasn't that everything was suddenly fixed. Nothing was fixed, exactly. But her nervous system had begun to quiet. The constant hum of anxiety that had become so familiar she'd stopped noticing it was finally beginning to fade. Her sleep was deeper. Her breathing was slower. When she looked at herself in the mirror, she saw someone beginning to look like themselves again. Thomas came by on the 10th day to check on her, bringing more firewood and fresh supplies. He found Iris sitting in the garden, her face turned toward the afternoon sun. "How are you?" he asked. Iris took a moment before answering. She wanted to give an honest answer, not the automatic "I'm fine" that she had given for so long to so many people. "I'm tired," she said finally. "But it's a different kind of tired. It's the kind where I'm tired because I've rested, if that makes sense. Not the kind where I'm tired because I haven't stopped." Thomas nodded, as though this made perfect sense to him. "Your grandmother used to say that the most important thing a person could do was learn to rest while they still had time," he said. "She said that rest wasn't something to earn. It was something to practice, like playing an instrument. She said the more you practiced resting, the better you became at it, and the better it worked for you." After Thomas left, Iris sat with this wisdom. She realized that she had spent her entire adult life practicing stress, practicing worry, practicing the constant state of doing. She had become very good at these things, and it had never occurred to her that she could practice something different. That rest, too, was a skill. That peace, too, could be cultivated. The third week at the cottage, Iris began a new ritual. Each evening, as the sun set, she would light all the candles in the cottage. She would draw a bath in the old-fashioned tub, and she would add soft music, the same gentle, wordless music she had listened to during her drive. She would soak in the warm water, with the candlelight flickering all around her, and she would let her mind become empty. She would simply be in her body, and she would let her body rest. After the bath, she would wrap herself in her grandmother's blanket and sit by the fire, watching the flames move and dance. She would let her thoughts come and go like clouds passing across the sky, without grabbing onto any of them or fighting any of them. She would simply watch them pass. On one such evening, as Iris sat by the fire, a profound realization came to her. It wasn't a sudden insight or an aha moment. Instead, it was a slow settling of truth, the way dust slowly settles to the bottom of a jar of water that has been shaken. She realized that she had spent so much of her life trying to earn rest through productivity, through achievement, through usefulness. She had believed, deep down, that rest was something you got after you had done enough. But what if that was backwards? What if rest wasn't something to earn? What if rest was something that made everything else possible? What if by learning to rest now, she was actually healing not just herself, but also her ability to be present and genuine with everyone in her life? She thought about all the people she loved, and she knew they would want this for her. They would want her to be well. They would want her to rest. And if she continued to drain herself completely, She wasn't actually serving them. She was only diminishing herself. This thought was so liberating that Iris felt tears come again, but this time, they were tears of relief. As Iris's third week at the cottage came to a close, she began to think about returning to her regular life. The thought no longer felt as heavy as it had when she first arrived. She had changed, even if she couldn't quite name all the ways. She felt more solid somehow, more anchored. One evening, she called the people she worked for and explained, kindly, clearly, and without excessive apology, that she would need to make some changes when she returned. She would need to reduce her hours. She would need to set boundaries. She would need to stop trying to be all things to all people. She explained this with a quiet confidence that surprised her, and she was even more surprised when they agreed to it almost immediately. Then she called the person she had been struggling with in her personal life. She didn't try to fix anything in this call. She simply said, "I love you, but I need to take better care of myself. That's not going to change how I feel about you, but it might change how I show up in the relationship. And I hope that's okay." The response she got was not perfect, but it was honest. And honest felt like enough. On her final night at the cottage, Iris made a fire that was larger than usual. She prepared a special tea, using some of the loose-leaf tea that Thomas had brought her. She sat in the rocking chair with her grandmother's blanket around her shoulders, and she allowed herself to feel the full weight of gratitude. She was grateful for the cottage, grateful for Thomas, grateful for the rain that had given her permission to stay inside, grateful for the fire, for the candles, for the quiet, grateful for her own body, which had finally been allowed to rest, grateful for her grandmother, whose wisdom was waiting in these walls, and yes, grateful even for the weariness that had brought her here, grateful for the way her own exhaustion had finally forced her to stop and ask for help, to prioritize herself, to understand that she deserved rest. As the fire crackled, Iris pulled out her journal and wrote something she wanted to remember. "I am learning that my value doesn't come from what I do. My worth isn't something I have to earn. I am allowed to rest. I am allowed to slow down. I am allowed to take care of myself. And in doing these things, I am not being selfish. I am being wise. I am honoring the person I am and the limited time I have on this earth. I am choosing to live gently, and that choice matters." She read these words back to herself several times, letting them sink deep. The next morning, Iris packed her bag. She left the cottage as clean and peaceful as she had found it. She left extra firewood stacked by the hearth. She left a note for Thomas thanking him for his kindness. And before she left, she sat one more time in the rocking chair. She sat in silence, feeling the weight of rest in her bones. A good weight, a healthy weight, the weight of someone who has finally been allowed to be human instead of always being productive. As she sat, she made herself a promise. She would come back. Not just once, but many times. She would make this a practice. She would learn to rest the way her grandmother had learned. She would return to this cottage whenever her heart grew too tired, and she would sit by the fire, and she would remember that peace was possible. The drive home was different from the drive to the cottage. Iris drove slowly still, but this time it wasn't because she was depleted. It was because she wanted to fully experience the journey. She watched the sky change colors as the day progressed. She noticed the shapes of clouds. She let herself exist peacefully within the car, without needing to fill the silence with news or urgent thoughts. When she finally arrived home at her tall, narrow house, it didn't feel quite the same as before. Perhaps she had changed. Perhaps the house had. Perhaps they had changed together. Iris walked through her home and made a few gentle adjustments. She brought her grandmother's blanket down from the bedroom and draped it over her couch where she could see it and touch it whenever she needed to remember. She placed candles on several surfaces, not everywhere, but in the spaces where she most often sat. She created a small corner by her bedroom window where she could sit and read, and she lined it with soft cushions and blankets. Most importantly, she changed her morning alarm. She set it for later. She decided that she would wake when she woke, at least on weekends. She decided that she would not check her email first thing in the morning. She decided that she would have tea before she did anything else. She decided that productivity was no longer her first priority. And these small changes, these gentle reorganizations of her life around rest and gentleness rather than productivity and urgency, began to create a different kind of existence. When people asked her about her time away, Iris had a simple answer. I learned that I was allowed to rest. And she said this with such quiet peace that people seemed to understand. Even if they didn't fully comprehend what she meant, the seasons turned. Autumn became winter, and Iris experienced her first winter in her tall, narrow house with the changes she had made. She lit the candles in the evenings. She made tea. She read books. She allowed herself to move more slowly through the world. And something remarkable happened. The depression that had lived in her chest for so long began to lift. Not all at once, not completely, but it lifted. And the space that was left behind filled gradually with something lighter. Not joy exactly, but perhaps the potential for joy, peace, ease, a sense that her life was her own, and she could choose how to live it. When spring came, Iris requested time off from work again, and she returned to her grandmother's cottage. Thomas was waiting for her, smiling as though she had never left. The cottage, too, seemed to welcome her, the garden stirring with the first green shoots of spring. This time, Iris's stay at the cottage was different. She didn't need to sleep for 14 hours. She didn't need to cry quite so hard. But she still needed to rest. She still needed the quiet. She still needed to sit by the fire and remember who she was beneath all the doing and all the pressure. And so she made the cottage her practice. Several times a year, whenever her heart began to feel the weight again, whenever she noticed herself beginning to run faster than she could sustain, she would make the journey. And each time, the cottage would be waiting. The fire would be laid and ready to light. Thomas would greet her with a kind smile. The silence would receive her like an old friend. But Iris also began to bring the essence of the cottage back into her everyday life. She began to understand that you don't have to leave your life to rest. You can rest within it. You can choose gentle. You can choose slowly. You can choose to be kind to yourself even in the midst of the regular, ordinary world. And over time, this made all the difference. Now, dear listener, as I bring this story to a close, I want you to know that Iris's journey is also an invitation. Like Iris, you have been carrying something heavy. Like Iris, you have perhaps forgotten what it felt like to rest. Like Iris, you may have believed that rest was something you had to earn, something you had to deserve. But I'm here to tell you, gently, and with all the warmth in my heart, that this belief is not true. You are already enough. You don't have to do anything else to deserve rest. You don't have to be more productive, or more capable, or more useful. You are enough, exactly as you are right now. Your heart is tired. That's okay. That's human. That's normal. And it's also a sign that you need something that you haven't been giving yourself. You need rest. You need gentleness. You need permission. So I'm giving you that permission now. Permission to rest. Permission to slow down. Permission to stop trying so hard. Permission to let other people handle some things while you take care of yourself. Permission to take a bath instead of answering emails. Permission to watch the rain and not feel guilty about it. Permission to sit and do nothing and call it productive, because healing is productivity. Permission to be gentle with yourself, even when you feel like you should be pushing harder. Permission to rest. Take a slow, deep breath now. Feel your body against whatever surface is holding you. Feel the blankets that are covering you, warming you, protecting you. Feel the safety of this moment, of this time that belongs only to you. You're safe. You're warm. You're cared for. And you can rest. As Iris learned, rest is not laziness. Rest is healing. Rest is medicine. Rest is how your soul tells you that you are worthy of care. Rest is how you honor yourself. As you drift towards sleep now, I want you to imagine yourself in a place of safety and warmth. Perhaps it's a cottage made of stone, like the one in our story. Perhaps it's somewhere else entirely, somewhere that feels like home to you. Perhaps it's a room filled with soft light and candles. Perhaps it's sitting under a tree on a gentle day. Perhaps it's simply here in your bed, wrapped in blankets that feel like love. In this place, there is nothing you need to do. No one is waiting for you. No one needs anything from you. There are no problems that need solving right now. There is no list that needs completing. There is only you, and safety, and the gentle permission to rest. Notice the details of this place. Notice how it feels on your skin. Notice the temperature of the air. Notice the quality of the light. Is it warm or cool? Bright or soft? Notice what sounds you can hear. Perhaps you hear rain. Perhaps you hear wind. Perhaps you hear simply the sound of your own breathing, slow and easy. And as you notice all of these things, feel your body becoming heavier. Feel yourself sinking deeper into the bed, deeper into the blankets, deeper into rest. Your shoulders are relaxing. Your jaw is unclenching. The tension that has lived in your body is slowly releasing. You are safe. You are held. You are cared for. Let go now. Let yourself drift. You don't need to hold on to anything. You don't need to stay awake. You don't need to be strong or capable or alert. You can simply be. As you fall into sleep, carry with you the knowledge that rest is your birthright. Carry with you the understanding that you are worthy of gentleness. Carry with you the memory of warmth and candles and fire and peace. And know that tomorrow, when you wake, the world will still be there. Your responsibilities will still be there. But you will have rested. And from that rest, you will have more to give. Not because you have to, but because you have chosen to take care of the person who matters most, yourself. Sleep well, dear one. Sleep deeply. Sleep peacefully. You have earned this rest simply by existing. And that is enough. More than enough. It is everything. Sleep now. The end and the beginning of your gentler